Throughout this course, we will be referring to several different acts. These acts are included under the Supplemental Materials menu item. They are the Cities, Towns and Villages Act, the Charter Communities Act, the Hamlets Act, the ch01 Community Government Act, the Dog Act, the Motor Vehicles Act, the All-Terrain Vehicles Act, the Summary Conviction Procedures Act and Regulations, the Victims of Crime Act, and the Youth Justice Act. Keep these documents handy so that you can look up specific sections we refer to as you go along. This unit will give you a better understanding of how you were appointed, where your authority comes from and what your authority is, your duties, and your general powers. Depending on which type of municipality you live in, there are 4 different acts that give communities the power to appoint bylaw officers and to enforce bylaws. The Cities, Towns and Villages Act, the Charter Communities Act, the Hamlets Act, and the ch01 Community Government Act. For example, the Town of Inuvik falls under the Cities, Towns and Villages Act. The Charter Community of Delaney falls under the Charter Communities Act. The Hamlet of Tuktoyaktuk falls under the Hamlets Act, and the Community Government of Gamati falls under the ch01 Community Government Act. Wherever you live, it is very important that you were appointed by bylaw. Section 137 of the Cities, Towns and Villages Act, Section 141 of the Charter Communities Act, Section 139 of the Hamlets Act, and Section 133 of the ch01 Community Government Act all say the following. Council may appoint bylaw officers to enforce any or all of its bylaws and may establish their specific duties under the Cities, Towns and Villages Act, Section 137 and 138, Hamlets Act, Section 139 and 140, the Charter Communities Act, Sections 141 and 142, and ch01 Community Government Act, Sections 133 and 134. You are given 3 main duties. 1. You shall enforce those bylaws of the municipal corporation that you are appointed to enforce. It's your duty to prevent bylaws from being broken in your community. For example, if your community has a bylaw that states that cyclists have to wear helmets and you come across someone riding without one, it's your job to stop them and let them know what they are doing is wrong. 2. You are an officer as defined in the Motor Vehicles Act and the Dog Act, and shall enforce those acts and the All-Terrain Vehicles Act. It's your duty to prevent the laws set out in the Motor Vehicles Act, the Dog Act, and the All-Terrain Vehicles Act from being broken. For example, if you see 2 vehicles racing, it's your job to stop them. The Motor Vehicles Act states that racing and other forms of stunt driving are prohibited. 3. You may represent the municipal corporation before a justice of the peace in the prosecution of a person charged with an offense under a bylaw. You may need to represent your community at Justice of the Peace Court when someone from your community is charged with an offense. We will explain Justice of the Peace Court in Unit 13. As a bylaw officer, you are also given certain powers that give you permission to do something legally. You have the power to issue orders to have people comply with local bylaws. An order is a way to get people to cooperate with the bylaw without having to go to court. The order should be in writing. We will talk more about orders in Unit 12. Under the Summary Conviction Procedures Act, you have the power to enforce bylaws by writing tickets, which would require a person to attend court and possibly pay a fine for violating a bylaw. We'll go over the process of writing tickets in detail in Unit 12. Remember, your power is limited to within your community. The RCMP is the organization that enforces federal and territorial laws throughout the territories, not municipal bylaw enforcement. Let's review. You were appointed by bylaw. Your 3 main duties are enforcing community bylaws, enforcing the Motor Vehicles Act, the Dog Act, and the All-Terrain Vehicles Act, and representing your community in court. You also have the power to issue orders and write tickets. In addition to your main duties and powers, you may also be responsible for promoting public safety, including fire prevention, vehicle safety, ATV and vehicle safety, firearm safety, and bicycle safety. You may also be in charge of providing safety awareness programs for schools and community organizations. When enforcing your bylaws, you will conduct regular patrols, carry out investigations, and respond to resident complaints and concerns. Then there's the paperwork. It is your responsibility to maintain records of bylaw infractions, to prepare reports, and to monitor the budget. Now that you understand how you got here, where your authority comes from, and what your basic duties and powers are, let's talk a bit about some of the qualities you will need to do this job well.